1 month! In 1 month you'll wish you had me back!
I didn't grow up reading comic books. My main exposure to superheroes came through the cartoons that were popular when I was growing up. This meant that some of my favorite superheroes were Batman, the X-Men, and of course, Spider-Man. Spider-Man has continued to be one of my favorite superheroes to this day. So when I hear about a game with Spider-Man, I'm always interested to give it a try, even if I am a little bit behind the times. The bad thing is that sometimes superhero games are not all that good. Spider-Man games haven't been immune to being bad in the past. So what do I think of this Spider-Man game? Let's find out. Marvel Spider-Man is an open-world action-adventure game developed by Insomniac Games. It was originally released in 2018 for the PlayStation 4. There is an enhanced version available for the PS5 and PC, but I am just playing the original for the PlayStation 4. You can purchase the game for $39.99 for the PlayStation 4 version, or you can purchase the PS5 remastered version for $49.99. Both of these versions include all of the DLC as well, but the DLC is still available separately if you do have an older version lying around. Spider-Man is rated T, and while I would put this on the low end of the T spectrum, the game does get pretty intense at times, so I think it is more fitting than other games I've covered. I was really impressed with the story in Spider-Man. Now, it is still very much a superhero story and doesn't do much of anything to revolutionize the medium or go outside of what you might expect. However, it handles the story well and presents some emotional moments and some tragic character arcs that left a lasting impact on me. Now, for those who know about Spider-Man, you realize that this take on the character has a few differences from what you may be used to, depending on where you know Spider-Man from. Spider-Man has been fighting crime for about 8 years at the start of the game, so there's already quite a bit of backstory that the game alludes to, but doesn't go in depth in hashing out. You get allusions to many of Spider-Man's foes, but there are a couple that are absent that fans of Spider-Man are probably very familiar with. Green Goblin doesn't seem to exist yet, as Norman is the mayor of New York City, and Dr. Octopus is also not a villain yet, as Peter starts the game working for Otto Octavius at his small laboratory. The game starts you off right in the midst of the action, as the kingpin of crime, Wilson Fisk, is being taken down by the police. You join the effort and eventually take down the kingpin. However, his absence leaves a power vacuum that other criminals try to fill. The main group that tries to fill this vacuum is called the Demons, who start to cause chaos in the city and seem to particularly have something against Norman Osborn. Spider-Man and his allies Mary Jane Watson and Yuri Watanabe try to figure out who is behind this new group and put a stop to them. While you may think that the story is simply going to focus on being Spider-Man, one of the strengths of the story here is that it doesn't just focus on being Spider-Man, but also on juggling the life of Peter Parker, at least to a certain degree. You'll see Peter working with Otto to make their vision a reality for their laboratory, interacting with Aunt May and helping out at Feast, a charity for the homeless and underprivileged, navigating his and Mary Jane's complicated relationship, and serving as a mentor of sorts for Miles Morales. The story here just does a really good job of tying both sides of Peter Parker's and Spider-Man's life together, sometimes with triumphant results, and at others very tragic. It's a story that builds emotional investment in the characters, which pays off as those characters get more involved in the larger events going on in the story. I think one of the dangers of superhero media is that sometimes the humanity of the characters gets lost in the powers and spectacle of big battles and epic conflicts. I don't feel like that happens here. Instead, great care is taken to weave humanity into all aspects of this world, and I think it really worked well in my opinion. When it comes to games about superheroes, a significant part of the success is how well it makes you feel like you're the superhero in question. Does this game make you feel like Spider-Man? I would say that yes, it does. Much like its story though, it also makes you feel like Peter Parker. You don't get to play as him as much, but the game makes sure to remind you that Peter isn't just able to do whatever a spider can, but that he's also really smart. The gameplay does a good job at bringing these two aspects together in some fun ways. In general, the game is great at making you feel like Spider-Man. While the web swinging does maybe have a bit of a learning curve, the web swinging is a lot of fun and for the most part really easy to do, at least on a basic level. I would occasionally, even after hours of playtime, still get stuck if I was trying to do something really fast or trying to get to a specific location on a building, but overall it was pretty easy to get a rhythm down and enjoy swinging through New York. Swinging isn't the only element to being Spider-Man that's important to nail. The other is combat. Again, the game delivers here. Combat is quick and agile, just like you'd expect from Spider-Man. You get to use his signature web shooters in the midst of combat, which allow you to tie foes up or even stick them to walls or things like that. Combat also expand as you unlock more and more things like skills, more gadgets other than his just regular web shooters, and suit mods and powers over the course of the game. There are two main ways that the game handles this progression. The first is through an experience system. You gain levels by completing missions, stopping crimes, fighting enemies, and even doing tricks while web swinging when you unlock that ability. Gaining levels does a few different things. As you gain levels, you occasionally gain passive boosts. You'll gain more focus bars that allow you to take down enemies with finishers or help you heal, and leveling up will also allow you to unlock more suits in the game. In addition, you will also gain skill points that you can spend on your skill tree. You can spend these to help increase your combat or web slinging abilities. These skill points can really open up combat and traversal to be a lot more enjoyable than when you start out as. But that's not a complaint really, as I really like the feeling of becoming more and more versatile as you progress through the game. The second way that progression is handled is through completing side content. Spider-Man is an open world game, and as with any open world game, there is a lot that you can do outside of the main storyline. What Spider-Man does well is to find a way to connect this to the progression system beyond just getting experience points for doing things. And this is done through a token system. Different events or activities will give you tokens as you complete things. There are 6 different kinds of tokens you'll earn as you play through Spider-Man. As you find backpack collectibles, you'll get backpack tokens. Taking pictures of various landmarks will grant you landmark tokens. Research tokens are earned by completing circuit puzzles and spectrographs at Octavius's lab, or by completing research station missions. When you take down enemy bases, you'll gain base tokens. When you stop crimes committed by the various factions in the city, you'll earn crime tokens. And then finally, by completing Taskmaster challenges, you will gain challenge tokens. These tokens are basically currency for you to use to unlock suits, upgrade gadgets, and unlock new suit mods. Overall, I enjoyed this system of incorporating the extra content into progression, but I'll also be honest that I felt there were a few flaws to the system as well, mainly in the fact that all of the side content wasn't created equal. Finding crimes in the districts just took a lot of time to do and wound up getting a bit stale feeling by the end of the game. I also didn't love the Taskmaster challenges. You could gain a number of different tokens based on how good you did on a given challenge, but some were very hard to get all the tokens on, and I wound up not having enough of these kind of tokens to fully unlock some of the upgrades on my gadgets by the end of the game. And this was the only type of token that I didn't wind up having enough of. So it was one of those systems that mostly worked, but just had a few shortcomings in my opinion. The various unlocks all expand your abilities in different ways. Unlocking suits gives you more cosmetic options, but also the majority of suits will give you a suit power that you can use after it charges up. This can be a quick charging of your focus bar for a certain amount of time, shooting webs all around you to hit enemies, allowing you to spawn holographic decoys, and a bunch of other powers. There's quite a few different suits and powers in the game. They're fun to play around with, but I felt like you could be pretty happy just playing with the powers of the first couple of suits and not really explore this too much. I felt like they made a super smart decision though with suits that allow you to match any cosmetic with any power, and that didn't tie suits to the power they unlock. Suit mods are little perks that you can mix and match separate from your suit power. These can allow you to gain focus or extra focus by using certain types of attacks, increasing your healing, or ones that give you better combat or stealth abilities. These are useful to mix around for certain types of missions that you may find yourself in. Getting a bit more stealth or some extra focus will be helpful in certain missions or to get certain extra goals in some of the side missions. Last but certainly not least are gadgets. The main gadget you start with are your web shooters, but you get all kinds of fun toys to play around with as you progress through the game. Impact web that sends enemies flying backwards quite a bit. Web mines that allow you to stick the mine to enemies, the ground, or objects and make the enemies attached to that surface or even to other enemies when they cross the beam. These were pretty fun to play around with, but I definitely had my favorites. I also felt that some came into the picture too late, and while they did wind up being useful, I just didn't get as much time with them to really use them as part of my arsenal and grow to love them quite as much as some of the earlier unlocked gadgets. I also wasn't able to upgrade these last couple of gadgets fully, as I mentioned earlier, so it just felt like they were kind of given the short end of the stick by the game. Now that's most of the gameplay, but you don't just get to play as Spider-Man during the course of the game. There are a handful of gameplay sections where you'll play as either Mary Jane Watson or Miles Morales. The bad news here is that these are all stealth-based missions. I'll be honest, I don't like stealth missions very much, especially if there's zero tolerance where you're caught and it's over and you gotta restart. The good news is that the game does actually handle the stealth sections fairly well. It is the type that where you're caught, it's game over and you've got to restart, but due to a generous checkpoint system and having some tools in your disposal to distract people, it made these times far better than than I expected. While maybe not my favorite moments in the game, they didn't detract from the game experience for me either, which is kind of a big deal because I, as I said, don't really like stealth missions, so the fact that they didn't really put me off that much is saying something. Overall, the gameplay is just very enjoyable and satisfying. The game makes you feel like you're Spider-Man in really all aspects of that reality. You're able to take guys down with your strength and agility, but also able to get stronger due to Peter's scientific genius as well in creating new gadgets and fun things like that. While there are some rough edges in some of the sections, it was never really enough for me to feel like the game was less enjoyable. Spider-Man, even in its PS4 version, is a really nice looking game. Unfortunately, I don't feel like the beauty of the game comes out in the footage I was able to capture for it. For some reason, I think the HDR messed up the footage, and even though I tried to correct it, I never found a good solution. So with that in consideration, the game really was nice looking. New York looks amazing, the character models are well done, especially in cutscenes. It's just a nice looking game. I also liked all of the variant spider suits, which obviously some are more for gag use than legitimately cool, but it's still a fun collection of suits. Sadly, the game does fall into some of the open world issues of people being kind of carbon copies throughout the city, but you can't expect there to be a city full of unique looking people. But the random people still are well made, and it does make the city feel populated. Sound design is also solid here. I like the soundtrack, even though it is more of kind of one of those background subtle types of music for the game, but it is still pretty memorable as you hear the Spider-Man theme play throughout and swell in the background at times. And I feel like the music is used really well, particularly in some of the emotional scenes that the game delivers. Another good aspect of the game's sound is the dialogue. The voice acting is really well done here and gives the characters emotional heft that works well with the story being told. It also helps that the game is pretty well written, so the combo of these things goes a long way. Open world games kind of have a reputation of having a lot of issues. The main issue that I wound up having were enemies that would get stuck in parts of the environment every once in a while. It wasn't major, but it did happen. I just had to find and take them out while they were stuck. Another minor issue is that the game does have a good amount of load time, but it didn't really bug me that much, but it is probably worth noting. Spider-Man is one of my favorite superheroes, and having an experience that makes you feel like you're playing as Spider-Man is going to be a great game. That's what you get here. Marvel Spider-Man gives you the chance to play as Spider-Man, but also does a great job of incorporating both sides of the character, the superhero and Peter Parker. Of course, it is a bit heavier on the Spider-Man side, but I find that very understandable. There is just so much that this game does right. It has a great story, enjoyable gameplay, and an interesting way of fusing the content of the open world to progression. Even where there are flaws, the strengths of the game very much outweigh them. Given this, I'm giving Marvel Spider-Man a 10 out of 10. To be completely transparent here, I really debated about giving the game a 9 instead. I wasn't a huge fan of Taskmaster's challenges, the crimes did get a bit repetitive after a while, and the stealth sections weren't my favorite parts. As I thought about it though, these parts were never bad enough to really reduce the enjoyment of the overall game. Taskmaster's challenges weren't bad except for trying to get the gold medal on some of them. The crimes may have been repetitive after a while, but it wasn't really until the end of the game that it started to bother me. And the stealth sections were well done enough that even someone who really dislikes those parts of games didn't mind them. All this to say is that I can totally understand why people wouldn't rate this as a 10 out of 10 kind of experience. I just did have such a great experience with the game, and the story had such an unexpected emotional heft to it that at the end of it all, I just couldn't give it anything less. What I do know is that I'm very much looking forward to diving into the DLC for this game and moving on to tackle Miles Morales and the upcoming Spider-Man 2. If they're anything like this was, it is a very good time to be a Spider-Man fan.
The odds were long, the danger close. But between Spider Cop's reckless intuition and the Chief's determined planning, they got the job done.